What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. Today's episode, we're going to be talking all things realignment. It is the number one story right now, probably in the sports world, certainly in the football world, and the number one story in the college football world. So I'm going to be breaking down the moves that are happening, where teams are going to be going, and maybe what I think, which conferences are going to benefit the most, which ones maybe either people are expecting to benefit that I think won't benefit as much, and maybe some conferences that people expect to not be as beneficiaries of this move, of these moves that are all happening. But again, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. If you go on to enjoy the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and leave a comment below your thoughts on college football realignment as a whole, maybe specific things that you think about it. But without further ado, let's dive into it. The most electrifying environments, the most passionate fan bases, the traditions we hold dear, the tailgates we wake up early for, the memories we make, the rivals we hate, and the losses we try to forget. This is college football. So number one, the move that kind of set this in motion, I'm trying to remember which came first, whether it was Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC or USC and UCLA to the Pac-12. They kind of happened around the same time, but those two moves, which will go into effect next season, actually, I think all of these moves that have been announced are going into effect after this upcoming college football season. So there's a lot of big moves. I think those are the four teams that are maybe the biggest movers and shakers from the kind of first wave of this. Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC. Texas will be able to renew their rivalry with Texas A&M and be able to, kind of go into some of those more regional rivalries that maybe they haven't been able to get into, like something like LSU. I could see Texas and LSU developing a little bit of a rivalry there. And obviously keeping Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry, say that 10 times fast. And Oklahoma kind of has the similar opportunity, even a team, if they can get kind of to that higher level and stay there, a team like an Arkansas for both Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma maybe can develop some sort of rivalry with A&M. The Longhorns and Sooners will always be each other's biggest rivals, I would say. Losing Bedlam is a little bit disappointing, I would say, as a college football fan. Those games against Oklahoma State have provided some really good entertainment. But I think the move to the SEC for both Oklahoma and Texas will be an adjustment, because the SEC is a little bit of a different style of play than the Big 12 is. I would say quite a different style of play, a lot more physical. Some of the environments, there are environments in the Big 12 that are top-notch, but the SEC, I would say, has the bigger and better environments. And obviously the biggest thing is the amount of national champions that have come out of the SEC in really the last 20 years at this point. So that'll be, I think, huge for both of those schools. They're already massive money makers, and I think they'll really be able to benefit each other, the Southeastern Conference and Oklahoma and Texas. The revenue that both teams will continue to bring in even more to the SEC will just be at an even higher level. So I think if I had to grade the moves for Oklahoma and Texas individually as schools and as teams, I would give it a solid A. I mean, it's the right move to make, especially with the Big 12 kind of shifting focus. I talked about that in another video, but this move for both schools is a major positive step in the right direction. I think for the conference, for the SEC, it's maybe an A+ move, bringing in two schools with the caliber of these two. I think if they can add a couple of ACC teams like a Florida State and Clemson, right now it seems like the ACC isn't maybe really going anywhere. I think a lot of people, myself included, expected that the ACC would be one of the conferences to kind of fall by the wayside, like what's happening with the Pac-12. But it looks like some rumors that are going around, and previously I had said it would make sense for Cal and Stanford to join the Big Ten because the academics, you got the two other teams in Southern California, USC and UCLA, and then even the most recent additions of Oregon and Washington. But looking at it, the ACC is somewhat underrated. I think maybe people aren't quite as familiar with just how strong a lot of the academic schools are there, like Duke and North Carolina, especially in that research triangle, NC State even. And not to take away from any other schools too, but those are the ones that probably are most well known for their academics in the ACC. So adding two teams like Cal and Stanford would be huge. It would give the ACC a foothold. I don't think they'd be able to compete with the Big Ten and SEC by any stretch. A couple of the teams would maybe be able to. A team like a Florida State or like a Clemson with the resources could still break into the playoff. And that brings up another point. I think I'll touch on that right now. I saw some little bit of, it's up in the air right now, but potentially shifting from, like the auto top 6 league qualifiers make the college football playoff, and then 6 at large, with just the conferences, maybe some gaining even more difficulty for teams to get through and to win, like the Big Ten and SEC, and some conferences either fading into obscurity and probably no longer existing in potentially the next couple of weeks. A conference like the Pac-12, I think the Pac-12's move is going to be to pick up Mountain West teams and just be okay with kind of taking a step down, or just completely disbanding, which would be kind of crazy to see happen. But again, real quick on the playoff thing, so I don't go off on a point and forget to wrap that one up. I think the best move would probably just be to go with kind of traditional rankings. Maybe your top 4 spots go to the Big Ten champion, the SEC champion, maybe the Big 12 and the ACC, those 4 auto bids. But even, I would say 2, potentially the Big Ten and SEC get like the true automatic bids, but I guess it probably would have to be 4. Those teams would get a bye, and then 5 through 12 all play against each other to get into a quarterfinal round. So that's what I think the playoff will look like. And then again, on the beneficiaries, I'll talk now about the Big Ten team. I think USC and UCLA also bring big brands. USC especially brings a massive brand to the Big Ten, and being able to add a little bit of regionality on that, in that Pacific coast with Oregon and Washington is also a huge pickup for the Big Ten. USC and UCLA, I probably would have given a grade of maybe a B-, because there's already a lot of big programs in the Big Ten with a lot of history and a lot of, cachet, I think is what the word is, or something like that. I probably am messing up that word, but those 2 schools add a little bit. But with the addition of Oregon and Washington, I give the Big Ten an A, and probably even an A+ grade for how they've handled this realignment thing. Because, I have seen some things for student athletes, especially in the sports that don't bring in as much revenue as one like football, and that play great games more frequently. Like I saw it, especially from softball players, kind of chiming in that this travel going, from as far east as Piscataway, in the New York City area, and then going out to Seattle, maybe within like a weekend or something, would be extremely tough on those student athletes. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. I don't want to brush over that at all and say that everything about these moves are good. And again, a big thing that Nick Saban, I think, talked about was that it takes away a lot of some of those local regional traditions. A conference like the ACC right now is keeping more of the regionality, but the Big Ten now stretches from New Jersey all the way out to Seattle and Oregon and Los Angeles. And the SEC has kept that a little bit. I think they've kept it really well, assuming this is kind of what they lock in with the teams that they already had in Oklahoma and Texas. The Big 12 already spread out this year with, West Virginia and Cincinnati all the way in the east, all the way over to BYU, and even the additions that'll be incoming with Arizona State, and Utah, which Utah, I kind of expected that as soon as I saw Colorado making the move to the Big 12. And with BYU already being there as well. Arizona and Arizona State also don't surprise me. I think that conference, I believe, will be the most competitive, it'll be really between the Big 12 and the ACC, I think. Big 10 and SEC. SEC is the top conference. Big 10 is kind of right below them. And then pretty big gap, but then you get down to the Big 12 and the ACC. And I think both of those conferences have also benefited from this realignment. I think all of the conferences do. I think some of the schools maybe don't as much. And even just looking from a broader picture, these teams having to travel around so much will certainly, especially for sports like baseball and softball and even basketball, where there's a lot more games being played, a lot more travel, it'll definitely be something that schools will have to try to figure out and will be very important to keep an eye on. But realignment is, I don't want to just, sit on the fence and not go on either side of it here, but it definitely has its positives and its negatives. I think the positives are you're going to have just ultra competitive conferences with the best teams, the biggest brands, especially in the Big 10 and SEC. On the negative, you're losing some of the traditions. You're putting a lot more strain on student athletes mentally and physically. And it just kind of, again, it takes away from what has made college football very special, which is the traditions and being able to, drive just a little bit to go to a game against a conference opponent. Obviously, rivals are going to still probably, for the most part, be close. But one thing I'm looking forward to as well that is more of a positive is being able to see matchups like an Ohio State and an Oregon more often, or a Washington and a Michigan, a game that actually, if you could see in the background up there, I went to Washington at Michigan night game in 2021. So being able to see big brands clash together, Michigan State and USC, kind of a battle of, Greek folklore, basically, or Penn State against USC or UCLA. I mean, there's a lot of matchups, and even those Western opponents, Nebraska going against those teams on the Pacific Coast, or Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of those teams being able to go up against just, big brand against big brand. And the SEC, they already have the success in recent times. Oklahoma and Texas bring a little bit more history and tradition to the conference and bring a massive rivalry to the conference that'll help bring in, I'm sure, a lot of revenue for the SEC. So overall thoughts, I'm definitely, I guess maybe I would say I'm leaning more towards being excited about this realignment. I do obviously have the consideration that there are some things that aren't ideal about this, that aren't perfect, that take away from some of the game. But I am looking forward to seeing what this really looks like when it actually is in action next year, because just thinking about what some of those matchups are going to look like is really exciting. I think the addition to, especially the Big 10, I think they've kind of taken over the spotlight with this, a little bit the Big 12 too. The SEC seems to be pretty settled. We'll see if things happen and they snatch some teams from the ACC or something. But this is going to be an unprecedented future in college football, and another team to keep an eye on if they continue to stay independent or if they finally make a move in this new college football landscape is Notre Dame. They've stayed away from being in a conference for a long time, so I would honestly kind of expect that to continue, but it might be something in a few more years down the line, depending on how this goes. They might have to finally make that move, but people have been saying that for years now, so Notre Dame, maybe they're just always independent. But let me know your thoughts below on what you think maybe about Notre Dame, which conference you think benefits the most from this. I would say the Big 10. I am from Big 10 country, so I might be a little bit biased. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below, which teams and which conferences benefit the most from this realignment. And let me know what you're most looking forward to. What matchup are you most looking forward to seeing next year, which is crazy to think about. We get an expanded playoff and these just totally new and just shifting conferences. So if you've stayed to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this. But for now, this is Peter Burtnett, College Football Talk, signing out. Peace.